Welcome to the Gynarchy Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Gynarchy Patel. Here we place women's health and feminism front and center where they belong, engaging in conversations that range from the fundamental to the fearless. With insights from expert guests, we aim to break through the barriers of the patriarchy and envision a new world led by the Gynarchy. So let's get started and dive right in. Welcome to the Gynarchy Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Gynarchy Patel, and today we're doing an episode called Resist with Sammy Kanter, who's a friend. Sammy is founder, chief media strategist, content creator, and a new media producer at Girl and the Gov, a communications platform with a mission to make complex political issues more accessible, engaging, and actionable for diverse audiences, particularly women. She is a co-host of their flagship show, Girl and the Gov, and is the creator of 3 widely read newsletters, the Gov Hub, a weekly digest of political news and headlines, #Viral, a trend report for political communicators, and Keeping It Current, which covers the overlap of the creator economy and social impact. Sammy also consults for campaigns, elected officials, advocacy organizations, and consumer brands. Welcome, Sammy. How are you?
Thank you. Oh my gosh, it is so cool to be on your show. I mean, like a year later from when you were first starting this show and, figuring out where you were going to take it. So honored to be here and super excited to chat all the things.
Thank you. Okay, I have to give everybody a little background. Sammy actually invited myself and another friend, actually season 1, episode 1 guest, Malia Funk, to her podcast long ago. What is it, like maybe 2 or 3 years ago now?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And I think the topic was birth control and abortion. Mm-hmm. And that was my first time being on a podcast.
Oh my God.
And I had, or maybe there have been one other little stint, but I had so much fun after that. And then when Malia and I parted ways, I was starting to think about like what to do. And I kind of reached out to you because I had such a good time yapping. I'm a natural yapper like you, that I just thought, maybe I could do that. And so actually, Sammy helped me produce this and got me from 0 to 60 super quick. So I really appreciate you for that. You're always special to me.
Oh my gosh, of course. And now look at this. It's like such a great success. And you've had so many amazing conversations, and to think like, wow, this is season 3. And these are important conversations to be had. I mean, if this current landscape doesn't tell that story, I don't know what does.
Yes. Well, thank you again. I don't know how long this will go, but I'm enjoying it and I get so much out of it. And I hope everyone else does too. So Sammy, I need to know. I don't think I ever asked you how you came to be doing all the stuff. Like, you're so kick-ass. You're like a Jill of all trades.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Honored. So it's funny that it's honestly been so long because time is such an illusion. But circa 2018, I obviously, or maybe not obviously, but I voted and then took the conversation to my friend group. I was like, oh, did you guys, go vote earlier? And a lot of my friends had not voted. And not only had they not voted, but they weren't registered to vote. So I started asking questions of like, okay, what's the reason for that? And none of my friends were at that point, in the political space or anything even close to that. Engineers, finance, medical, everything sort of in that unit. And to them, they're like, we know it's important, but it's overwhelming. I don't know where to learn about it. I don't know how to get started with it. And there was a real environment that asking a question, was just absolutely the worst thing you could do. God forbid you didn't know an answer to a question, it was political social suicide, right? So as a result, I was like, okay, we have to solve that. We have to create a space where people can ask questions. There's no stupid question. They can find a way to sort of start their political learning journey. And that's where Girl in the Gov really began. It started as events. Pandemic happened. It turned into a podcast. It evolved into newsletters, digital, God bless TikTok, coming into our spheres and whatnot, and has really become this sort of two-part venture. One, continuing to educate and bring more people into the political space. And then the other is trying to educate also the political space on how to actually reach people in this new media age and what that actually looks like. So it's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that. It's definitely been an evolution and a journey, and continues to be so as, things across this landscape move and people's tastes change and things like that. But yeah, it's crazy to sort of think where it all began, and now here we are.
I love that. I mean, I kind of feel like I was inspired in that way too. Like, you saw a problem, you saw a gap that needed to be filled, and you went in and did it. That's amazing. I think that's exactly what this episode is about. Like, what can we do? There are a lot of problems. Like, what inspired this episode, I mean, it's season 3 premiere, is that I feel like we are living in hell. Women are living in hell. And every day we see these headlines. I also find it overwhelming. Honestly, like, I feel a little unprepared for this podcast, because even though I follow the headlines, like, there's so many bad things happening right now that is hard to keep it all straight. You do get overwhelmed scrolling. And so I thought it would be good to talk to you. And I do love your content. Like, it's bite size and kind of a great way to keep up. But also, the other thing I love about you is you are kind of a ray of sunshine, like, which we need right now, because it can be very depressing seeing people getting arrested, like mothers and children, and Medicaid being defunded, So
yeah, it's a funky balance, like, even in creating that content, because for the good things happening, we need to highlight that, because in highlighting those good things, you learn about what's possible when good governance happens, right? Or when you elect the right people or appoint the right people. And that's as important as also pushing back against the negative, because you can push back against the negative, but if there's nothing to replace it, then we have a problem, or you don't know what that replacement looks like. That's not helpful either. But it sometimes can feel like a funny juxtaposition when I'm sharing a good news thing and so many bad things are happening. So it is, I love being that ray of sunshine, but it's a funny thing to think about. But what I really advise people to do is to microdose politics and the political news that's going on, is to figure out a routine that works for them. Could be signing up for, one of my newsletters, but really figuring out, okay, I'm going to read X amount of stories or view this amount of content today, and really put a line in the sand as to when you're going to stop doing that for a day. Like, you don't have to be a issue area expert on every single news story that's going on. Leave that to me. But to be informed, right? Like, that is the way to be able to stay in the know, but not absolutely lose your mind. And if I were to also advise a step further, is like, if there's a particular area of policy or politics in general that gets you excited, gets you interested, or you just genuinely care, then that should be your area of focus. And like, yes, politics, everything is interconnected. There are a lot of domino effects that are constantly happening, but try and narrow your focus. And that will help a lot in terms of reducing some of the overwhelm.
Yeah. Is there one particular, like, so my focus, of course, is women's health things, feminine, things affecting women in general, but that's huge. Everything's affecting women in some ways. and so I tend to scroll on Blue Sky for news, and I have created my own little, what do they call it? Like an curated list. Yeah. Well, you can create your own list. So I put anybody I'm following who talks on these topics in that list. So I tend to scroll there and then try to limit it within a day. But like, what are your tips? Like, you're on every platform. I mean, I'm on a lot too, but I tend to not be spending much time on all of them. So like, I'm kind of just curious, like, how you keep up with the news and how you don't get overwhelmed.
No, it can be very challenging, and depending on the day and like what else is going on, it can really change and vary. But what I do is I'll spend an hour doing some scrolling on both Instagram and on TikTok and send myself whatever headline that's being shared there. And I'll use that as a base for then Googling the story back. So say it's a specific story about how rural hospitals will close as a result of Medicaid being defunded. I take that headline and I go back and then I Google that, because if for me personally, reading something is less emotional to me than viewing something happening, like a real-time video.
Right,
so
like
it's a way for me to
something
so it's a way
like
for me
that,
to like take it and then read about it. And then if I'm less like emotionally reactive about it, then I can do something more effective about it, because I can see the mission as opposed to that. So I do a lot of like that sort of thing, but I do really consume a lot of content constantly. But it just kind of comes par with the course of being able to also create my own content that's relevant to the news. So, there's times I take breaks and other times where it's like, you're just in the midst of it all.
Okay, well, let's get into talking about what women should be paying attention to right now. Like, what are the biggest things that you're concerned about on a, I guess a national scale, but then, you can break it down further. I know you cover individual states too, which I also find like, whoa, like a lot, lot to look at.
Yeah. I mean, what is there not to be concerned about is really, the smaller edge of things. But I would say, we really have to be concerned about women's healthcare. I would say the one thing that gets really mixed in, I don't know if I'm going to articulate this properly, but it's a little bit of like how we got here, is the women's health research of it all, right? We've been so behind, and we were only just starting to catch up under this last administration, and it's still not even close. And that lack of research, that lack of when you go to the doctor and the doctor goes to you, hey, I hear you, if they even say that, right? But, and then they go, well, I don't, there's no research to support anything that you're feeling or experiencing. And then that sort of has lent itself to people obviously going to spaces they feel heard, which is online or asking a Facebook community chat, whatever that might be, which obviously pushes into sort of conspiracy theory land, which is how we got into MAHA and RFK Jr. And then here, which the irony is now we're taking away the research and stripping the funding for all of these things that not only help women, but help everyone in general, right? Mm-hmm. So that really concerns me. Of like, we are not only, not in a good spot, but we're going backwards in time in terms of that.
Underfunded to begin with, and now they're peeling that back further, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's one thing to be really concerned about. Of course, everything in the abortion space, I would say, be very concerned about. But I would also say it's the trickle down, for lack of a better term, of all of these other cuts, specifically when it comes to Medicaid, for example, right? If we are closing as a result of these cuts, nursing homes, and then you are having to take care of an aging or sick parent while also raising your children, you therefore cannot be in the workforce. You also can't really afford to balance both of these things. So we again push women out of the workforce and their careers and, squeeze them for the money that they have made so far. And so, because typically these are the roles that fall onto the daughters, not the sons. So that's something that I'm particularly, concerned about.
Yes. And I mean, to your last point, like the Medicaid, like defunding that, 40% of pregnancies are covered by Medicaid in this country. Yeah. And the starting point is that we are behind most developed nations in terms of maternal health and infant health, so it's only going further in the toilet. So yes. So I guess I want to talk about like what you see as successful things that are being done to resist, Is that, I know you cover this on your platform about some of the good things happening out there, and who's doing them. So maybe, or where, what are the rays of hope? Like who's pushing back against these issues?
Yeah. I mean, legislatively, we've got some really good state representation that's pushed bills through and gotten signed by Democratic governors. So I think those particular instances and whatnot show that paying attention to your state and local is incredibly important, because your state and your local is like actually your first line of defense in a lot of things. And then similarly to the state AGs, attorneys general, the Democrats have really been pushing back and suing with like every ability that they've been able to, and building coalitions in doing so. So I would say that both the Dem governors and the Dem AGs have been doing a great job at pushing back with the tools that they have. And then also in the states where we are able to push Dem, legislation, we've done a very interesting and good job of doing that. Sometimes not as successfully as I would think, because also you have to think like the Dem party is also a 10, right? So what does that mean per, state? But one thing that did pass recently and just got signed into law is actually in Colorado. They had already in 2020 actually passed via a ballot measure, paid parental leave for 12 weeks. And then via legislation, they just signed into law a 12-week extension on that for parents with infants in the NICU. So that's amazing. A really good win. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And I think too, you see that as like a model also too, that other states, like when you have something good that happens, other states use that as a model to do it in their own. So it's not just an accomplishment there, but it gives them the blueprint for doing it elsewhere, which is very important.
Right. I've seen that some states have managed to enshrine abortion in their constitution, and that's been amazing. And then I just saw another headline. I thought, like, weren't they blocking the defunding of Planned Parenthood? Something like that. I think I saw that recently.
Yeah, there was a lawsuit, but that's one of those things, like anything that goes into the courts, sometimes again, it's like a good thing that it's there, but it changes so rapidly as to like where it lands that I'm always hesitant.
The other like just ironic thing, I mean, I guess what the Republicans do just never makes sense to me, but like they're always talking about states' rights, but then when the state follows the people's desires and puts it on the ballot and gets something like abortion enshrined, for example, they'll then try to, oppose it in the Supreme Court. What is that, So, and, that's another thing I would love to talk about is just, my goodness, the Supreme Court, they're just so, I mean, it's actually just scary, right?
Yeah. They really just have taken a rubber stamp to, Trump's agenda. And it is the embodiment of what we warned about years ago through all of these, appointees and their, approval.
Right. And I mean, you mentioned I'm actually now becoming more critical of the Democratic Party as well. I thought we'd spend some time talking about that too, because, it seems really fractured, and that's what partly helped elect Trump, because there are just so many people disillusioned with the Democratic Party. Like, what do you think the future is? What's happening in it? And like, who are the new leaders and what's going to happen why does I feel like the establishment Democrats also just have so much power and are like almost like shooting themselves in the foot often.
Yeah, I would say too, though, even like the term like establishment Democrats, like anytime anyone doesn't like something that happens with the Dems, they just say, oh, the establishment Democrats. Like no one even knows who that is. Right. Like if you were to list out like who is that? Who is that person, that magical person at the DNC, that magical person fundraising at the D trip or the DS, CC, like, you know what I mean? So I think there's the brand.
Right.
Yeah.
I think when I say it, I'm sort of meaning like the old guard, these people that I think a lot of younger people think should retire. My kids, for example, like my kids have made me even more woke. Okay. Because I do kind of feel like they were kind of putting me in a basket of not left enough, and they've turned me a bit. I kind of see how problematic some of them can be, That's what
I mean, I would say too, and this is something that's a very bipartisan viewpoint, is that there needs to be age limits. And Ben Sheehan, who talks about this a lot, has done a lot of research on it. And the question is like term limits or age limits. And while there's a lot of support for term limits, the bigger portion of that is age limits. And then his response to people talking about, is that like ageist though, like capping people at say 80? He's like, well, technically we already in the Constitution have age limits for like when you can run to be a senator, when you can run to be president. So like there, is there's that precedent right, that's already set? And you can make arguments for or against. I, have heard great arguments for all of the above, where you land is where you land. But the point is that there's precedent. And I think that in and of itself has been a frustration across the board in both parties, is these people that are ancient. I mean, we've got Chuck Grassley on the Republican side as a senator who's 90 something, Bernie Sanders. And this is the thing too, though, is Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders retiring. That's funny. That's
like, he's ancient and he's running for Senate again. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a double standard on the left, though, of like within the sphere from progressive to moderate, conservative to lean center left, that somehow there's exceptions to a rule. And it's like, if you're going to critique the Dems for having age issues, well, then like your quote unquote heroes can't be cult leaders too.
Yeah. You got me. You got me there, because I'm probably part of the Bernie cult. So, okay. Yeah. So who are you excited about? Who are some people really shaking it up and are hopefully going to win in midterms, and then,
totally. Okay. So I have quite a few, but I would say one that's congressional and one that's Senate in terms of people that are already in office. Alyssa Slotkin, who is a senator from Michigan, former CIA. She just absolutely kills it. She's never even won her own town before because it's a very red area. And she talks a lot about winning back that center and also just very pragmatic, like economic issues. So I find her to be incredibly appealing and able to really communicate like a normal person. And the second person that I also find in that camp is Greg Landsman, who is a member of Congress from Ohio. I believe he's actually J.D. Vance's member of Congress technically, which is wild, but he's a fantastic communicator and a great follow on TikTok, I might add, and explains things in like really just simple terms. And again, like is able to speak like a normal person and has great ideas that I think are super pragmatic, that really get at an issue. And I think that oftentimes is the issue on the Democratic side at large, is people are so wonky. And while that's important when you're actually writing the piece of policy, right? When you're communicating to to anyone that doesn't work in policy, they're like, what are you saying? I don't like, eyes glazed over, right? And so if everyone's eyes glazed over and your brand's already bad, no one's paying attention. So your argument's not even being received. So I think both of them are great communicators and able to actually get not only their stances across, but communicate solutions. And I'm excited to see where they land and go from here.
Okay, so and you think that is going to turn around in the midterms in the next?
I really hope so, but I try not to make predictions in politics because the mood changes so rapidly, especially now with social. And Rachel Gianfonsa, who reports actually on Gen Z specifically, but has covered sort of this general online sphere as well, recently put out research in an article within it about just how quickly the mood changes on social. Gavin Newsom's like the best example of that, right? He, following the election was sort of like everyone's, not hero is a little bit too big of a word, but people were really looking at him like, okay, he's the bully we need, right? And then he launched the podcast, which I will say was the right idea, wrong execution. Like he totally botched it. But that was such a, shot in the foot. You're like, okay, he really killed any presidential hopeful, right? And then he came back now with all this pushback against Trump and all of his, the petty videos he's doing. He just went to South Carolina, did a tour, and said happy birthday to like Lindsey Graham in the most petty way on Insta. And it was incredible. And now he's, resurrected his reputation as like a sociopath, but our sociopath
sort of reputation. Right. Oh yeah. So I saw that. I like how he was hitting back Trump, but yeah, he's not exactly a prize. I mean, yeah, I haven't listened to the podcast, but yeah, I heard about some of the guests and it did sound a little like, okay, I don't want to listen to this.
Yeah. He I understood the premise of bringing on basically not just like Republicans, but people really in their space with the idea, at least from my end, like the marketing lens, people that have cult followings on the right that would only ever like hear a Democrat if they were following their Republican person that they're obsessed with, like a Charlie Kirk who sucks, but just like that person, they're like, okay, well, Charlie went on Gavin's show, so I'll listen to him there because I love Charlie, which means that's the only spot that they might intersect actually with a Democrat and hear something from a Democrat's voice. Because I know a lot of Republicans that I'm the only Democrat they know. Okay. So like it is the only thing that might break through there. However, where he really messed it up was he was too celebratory of like these people. Like he kind of like rolled out the red carpet in this way.
Too nice.
Where he's like, oh my gosh, like my kid like wanted to skip school to meet you. And it was like, this is not the face of the resistance when you're complimenting them. Like you having them there so you can debate. Great. Let's see it. Like, absolutely. Right. So again, right idea of trying to like,
right. In some ways he's bringing them an audience.
Right. So it's all about doing it right. He did it wrong for sure.
Okay, so this makes me think of like one of the big problems I think with politics is that it just seems like the people in office don't really represent, they don't represent the values. They don't even represent the people who they represent, so
yeah.
Like, how do we get more people, more women, more people of color, more LGBTQ plus, people in office? Like maybe there's, I don't know. Yeah. Do you have thoughts on this? And
no, I have
happening. Do you see this happening more? I mean, I really love that Mom Donnie won New York City. I wasn't believing that was going to happen, honestly. And I was like, what? I got the kids notification from my kids and I was like, wow. Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I think where it really starts, like, if you look at like state legislatures, right, is a lot of those roles are not full-time roles. So, and they pay very little, right? So some pay $15,000 for a year. Like you can't live on $15,000, not to mention that being really, even if they say it's not a full-time role, being a legislator is because you're always on, right? You don't get to like take that face off for a day and not be that representative for that community. You never know when something's going to happen. Just because you're not sitting there writing a bill doesn't mean you're not doing that part of the job, right? So we have tons and tons of legislatures that don't pay real wages for that role, which means it becomes really limited to people that are really wealthy already, really rich, that can do it, or they're very old and retired, also probably rich as well. So, or it's somebody that luckily has a spouse that is able to take care of, the whole household and make some sacrifices there, right? So that becomes not only really limiting in terms of what happens at the state, and often what happens at the state goes to national. Like the Republicans have a very distinct strategy of trying to pass things that aren't constitutional at the state level with the purpose of it becoming a legal case that ends up in front of the Supreme Court, right? So what happens there is really indicative of what happens elsewhere, especially too, when you consider that oftentimes the launch pad for people at the federal level are these state legislatures and these state-wide roles or otherwise. So if we're not supporting it at its base, like at its core or foundation, we're never going to be able to create a space where it's easier at that higher level either. So I think a lot of the change that needs to happen is there. There have been some legislators that have increased the pay, not necessarily substantially. Like, for example, like New York is a full-time role. So I don't remember what the wage is as of like the most recent
wage.
It's like $140K at least a year. So it's a living wage. And it's it really is a full-time job, and it's being treated like that. So therefore the people that it's attracting are able to come from diverse backgrounds and have that. So I think it's one of those things where it's like an unpopular thing when people don't believe in their representatives already to be like, hey, pay them more. But I think part of the issue too, we have a civics gap. So people only think that their representatives are federal level, right? They don't necessarily know that there's a state ledge. And I see that a lot in even comments that I'll get in terms of something good that's even happened, where they just assume every elected member is at the federal level. Like there's a big civics gap there that we need to fix.
Yeah, what you're talking about just reminds me, like, this just introduces like so many conflicts, when they're not paid a living wage, because then they're going to be seeking funding from, and I have such a problem with that too. Like, I feel like there should be a limit to how much politicians can raise or, should take in corporate funding, for example, and these PACs. And I'm really impressed with those politicians that can do it with like just small grassroots donations. I don't even know how they do that. But yeah, if we just, if it was a salaried position that you could live on, that would help, But yeah, I don't know what the solution to that is. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is true though. And that is something that we see is more conflicts of interest that enter the vicinity when they aren't compensated well, right? Like that is an open door to a corruption issue. So I do think raising the wage there is really important. If we're also arguing that people should be paid a living wage for their job, then we also have to provide that too, right? We're not going to recruit the best teachers if we're not giving a living wage or beyond. We're not going to, recruit the best police officers. Any type of job, right, where you want the best of the best to be there, you need to compensate them correctly. So I really think that is an important thing that enters the space. And obviously I agree too. I think there needs to be limits in terms of campaign fundraising, but that's only about to get worse because one of the cases that's going ahead of the Supreme Court, actually J.D. Vance from when he was a senator, is about sort of changing that to make it worse. So I will also say too, the irony.
I haven't heard about that. I would like to know about that.
Yeah, it's in this next session is going to be heard. And basically, it wants the parties actually have like a limit on how much they can give to candidates, which is where these like super PACs come in. So they can, put money through that way, but the parties are limited. And basically this lawsuit would challenge the cap the parties have, meaning that they would be able, if the Supreme Court ruled in their favor, be able to actually give candidates directly more money.
Oh, and you just reminded me, another bit of news that I saw on the timeline this week was that religious organizations are going to be able to donate to politicians. What happened to, separating church and state? Everything's just going.
It's
the dustbin of history.
No, it really is. But I think like that brings up like an important point too of like the resistance element, right? Like, yes, at large, bad, no argument for me, but like, what can you do in your own life to mitigate? And it's making choices about, okay, where do you go to church? What's your church's view on that, right? Did your church decide to be like, oh, good, we're going to take advantage of this and use this, to donate to particular, politicians, causes, et cetera? Or are they taking a stand against it, right? So like making a choice as to like where you decide to, practice your religion or what stores you decide to, buy from. And like certain things are, you don't have a choice, right? If you live in the middle of nowhere, for example, and the only store that you have to purchase things at is Walmart, like trying to also like critique somebody whose only option is that one store is like not it either.
Not fair.
So like just be no, not at all. So just to be clear in terms of like that sort of strategy, but if you do have the ability to make a choice, is to make that choice via, with your values. And it does make a difference.
That's a good point. I mean, I tend to kind of be anti-religion overall. However, I want to say that in lovely New England, where I live, there are so many churches now I see with the, LGBTQ plus flag flying and,
Yeah.
so that's been lovely to see. And you're absolutely right. That's the way you can continue to keep your faith but choose choose better, right? So yeah, the topic at hand is resistance, right? So I love that you brought it there. I do think these economic protests have been successful. I love to hit these corporations and where they care, the bottom line, because they don't seem to care about ethics sometimes. And I think these protests are amazing. But beyond that, politically, like what can we do? What can we do to actually make real change, in government?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's tough. I think there are a lot of limitations right now. Like we don't very transparently, it's like we don't have the majority at the federal level in any capacity, like not even close.
Right.
Yeah. And to further the argument of the age element, right? We had 3 members of Congress on the Dem side pass away, taking away 3 people that we were close, that brought us closer to at least even being an even split or almost an even split.
And
right?
when they pass away, they can't be replaced, right? Till the next.
It depends. It depends on the state's rules. So some of them, it's a special election, but the governor may choose to decide when, for example, that special election is held. So, right, you could be very political as a governor with depending on how the rules are set, how you manipulate that to your benefit, right? So it really is different per state, but it is a can of worms. And it's not like 2 days later, we've replaced this person with another elected official. Right. Okay. So there's that as an issue, but we really are, in this spot where, limitations I've seen a lot of backlash at not impeaching Trump, which is this funny thing where I'm like, we don't have that. Yeah.
What do you mean? Backlash from who? Like online?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. My algorithm is very left. But okay. So
yeah. And so with that, which, obviously, it'd be great to impeach him. We've already done it twice. The first term, he still stayed in office. So first of all, it's not actually a useful tool. You can feel a way about it, but does it do anything? No. Okay. It just wasted a lot of floor time that could be used pushing back against an actually bad bill. So that doesn't do, you know what I mean? So it's this funny balance where people are very mad about everything, which is valid, but then get mad about some of these minutia things that actually don't do anything because they seem to either don't know how they work, which is fair. Most people are not exactly civically educated. I don't blame anyone on that. Or, just don't know where to sort of put that energy. And I also get that. So, as to what's to do, I mean, I'm looking at the governors, I'm looking at the attorneys general. I'm looking at these secretaries of state. I'm looking at these election heads that are going to be vital for the midterm elections. And I'm also looking at the elections for 2025 and thinking, okay, well, what do we have to win there? And right now we have 2 governors races and 2 state ledges that are up for election this year, Virginia and New Jersey. So that's for me is okay, that's the focus. What can we tangibly control? We can't control what to a degree is happening in Congress. We can use small tools to delay things, right? In terms of what's happening in committee or, doing long floor speeches and things of that nature. But what's really valuable at this moment from my lens is what's happening at the state level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I was talking to another Gen X girlfriend, and one of the things we get concerned about is it just seems like young people aren't engaged, and not getting out to vote. And because it does feel sort of like a lost cause sometimes, it just sounds depressing right now, how it doesn't even seem possible to flip things around. Right. But so, I guess how can we motivate more young people to get out there and vote, and, for every election, not just the presidential one, but these little ones, your local ones, your state,
I mean, it requires them to also get involved because it's when you see your peers doing something and it appears cool to you, you will do it, right? It's that peer pressure effect. So if you see that like somebody your age is the head of their dumb party locally and they're hosting these great events and they're going door knocking, they're doing these things together and it's fun and it's cool, then like you're going to do it. Like my friend Zach Constantine, who's in charge of like the Orange County Democrats in New York. I mean, he is Gen Z to the core. He is Brett Summer. He is all of the like fun things. And he really like is great at modeling how to be involved online. And also like online, when I mean online, I mean showing what it's like to do that in real life and makes that cool. And so I think it requires a lot of people to jump in and like actually get off their couches and do something.
Right. There's physical events and going out there and knocking on doors. But I think like media, this, like online media. So, what recommendations do you have? I mean, I certainly think your newsletter is helpful. It kind of gives you some actionable things at times that you can do. But like, what can people do maybe day to day, week to week, month to month, whatever they can handle online to help things out,
For sure. I mean, they can support, media on the left, right? Whether that is donating to NPR or your local newspaper, it's supporting those media organizations that are, reporting. Your dollar goes a long way there too, right? Like that's the type of thing that can make a huge difference when we're competing with, like, if I look at like the podcast charts, right? And I look at like the news section and the top 10, half or more of those people are from the far right. We're clearly not doing a good job at supporting left-leaning or even just center media, right? Just nonpartisan, fact-based media, if that's the case, right? So what you can do, and even without donating anything, is listen and support those news organizations, downloading, sharing those, and making sure pushing those, far right media sources out of the top. And out of like when somebody then, you have to think too, it's like if somebody's like just curious in general, they're like, oh, like I heard some story happen, and they go to their podcast app and they're like, oh, like I wonder who would like, who's talking about this. And like the top, say it's 6 out of 10 are far right. And they just click on one of those. Well, then they're bought into that, right? That just changed their media stream. And also too, like another counter to that as well, which is what we've been seeing for a very long time, but even more so, is people on the far right that are sort of, they're using some other topic to pull people in, right? Candace Owens is notorious for this, right? Of talking about the Blake Lively situation and using that to like pull people into her far right craziness, right?
Wow, that's a good point.
Yeah. So she has a huge audience that now thinks whatever she's saying elsewise is normal because they thought what her other takes were normal on something that they were interested in elsewise.
Wow, I love that point. And you've given me an idea. Like we should be, and you do some of this, and I don't, but like maybe I should be talking about Blake Lively. It's trying to get the algorithm and people to come to me, and then I can sneak in my, real agenda.
I always call it the Mary Poppins effect. And it's effective, right? You're pulling in a topic that everyone's talking about that's like mass appeal and utilizing that to bring people into other topics. So can't recommend it enough, just maybe not for Candace Owens.
Yeah. Oh boy. I wasn't aware that the top podcasts are lean right. Is that the case? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So we need more. We need more of us yappers, actually.
For sure. And it's a multitude of things, right? Like, as you know, like doing a podcast, like it can't just like exist. Like it has to be marketed. So we can create as many podcasts as we want, but if we're not supporting them and supporting all the different content things that come off of them, then we're not really taking up more media space there. We're just technically taking up more database space. Mm-hmm. So I think that, really opens the door to like more questions and more ideas of like how we fund all of these different things on the left and, have those voices out there. And there has been an improvement in terms of some of that, but it's still, the right has been doing this for years and years and years. Like we are so far behind, and we need, again, it's more, but it's also quality. Like it can't just be done for the sake of doing it. Because again, if like you do a podcast and no one listens to it, what did we do? Right.
Right. That's a great point. I know. So, Yeah, I think it's kind of overwhelming just thinking about the whole landscape out there and all the different platforms. But whatever is your favorite, right? I guess we should be trying to like and follow and listen and support and comment, etc. Those influencers that we want to really have influence, political influence in the future and in government, right?
For sure, right? It's pushing them on the algorithm, you know? And also,
Mhm.
I would say, as like a counter to that too, like I personally, as like someone that works in this space, follow people across the spectrum because I have to know what they're saying. I can't argue against it if I don't know what's up. But if I were like not in this space, right?
Right.
Then I would make sure, unless they were my personal reps, like I do think even if like, say you're a Democrat and you have Republican representatives, you should know what's going on with them. You should follow them. But if they're not in your area, not whatever, don't give them a follow. Like you can always,
Right.
do a little search and see what they're saying, but don't push them in the algorithm, right?
Right.
Don't hit share, maybe screenshot it instead, and then like send it to a friend so it doesn't push the algorithm. Don't hit save, again, screenshot it. So it's like also being smart about the behaviors of how you interact with like your opposition's content and making sure that like if you are sharing what they are doing, that you're doing it in an effective way that's not actually giving them more of a voice or like more reach.
Yeah, that's funny because it reminds me like on some of these, like when I was using Twitter more, because now I don't, I scroll on Blue Sky, but there I had blocked a bunch of odious characters, like very, including the president. So yeah, you can also block them. Like I'm okay with getting totally filtered bias left-leaning news. So Sammy, have you ever thought of running for office? Like I would love to see like young women like you run for office.
Thank you. I have not. I mean, I've thought about it, but I definitely know that like it's not for me. I like to be behind the scenes and making that sort of thing happen. I definitely am too, what would be the word, reactive to be an elected official. And I also just don't, it's just not what I want to do. And
Yeah.
I think owning what you know, like knowing what you want to do too is like just as important. And it's just, I want to keep working in politics, but that's just not the way I want to do it.
That's funny because yeah, your answer is similar to mine. When once in a while somebody realizes that I'm very political and they're like, "Why don't you run for office?" And I'm like, I'm very polarizing, and I think to be a politician, you kind of have to be like likable by everybody. And I really have I have big people who love me or hate me. Like it's kind of like that. So, and I can't. I like to be able to not have to, I don't like to be filtered. And I kind of feel like you have to filter more, filter yourself
Yeah.
more.
I think it really depends. I think, you know, depending on again, like what you're running for, what the job at hand is too, right? Like there's so many, whether it's county or state level, like very specific tasks for certain like elected officials, right? Like an ag commissioner, right? Like that
Mm.
is a certain thing, certain set of tasks that you're really, dealing with that's different from say being like a city council member. So I think, again, it sort of depends on like how polarizing can you be in certain roles. And look, I mean, in this current landscape, I think anything can be polarizing, I guess. I mean, I could say the wrong Skittle flavor and people are like up in arms.
Yeah, that's true. We have people who are very polarizing in big office right now.
For sure.
So
For sure.
So what are your future plans? I mean, you're doing a lot, but what are you excited about? What's next for you?
Yeah, no, the things that, I'm most excited about are, continuing to sort of like bring the light to some of the good things that are happening, as well as, obviously the bad as well, but doing it in a way where people can digest it. So that's something that's still a passion of mine, and taking that into like more and more spheres. But adjacent to that, it's growing sort of, the consultancy end of it and helping, campaigns and electeds and organizations as well, really figure out how to, land themselves within the new media space. What does that look like? And now we're not just talking about Gen Z, right? We're talking about Gen Alpha, which will be voting in 2028, right? That's an entirely different generation. And I don't think the political space, or honestly, a lot of brands in general too, are ready for what that looks like and what that generation is like at all. So I think, there's a lot to learn and a lot of space to grow for the Girl on the Gov brand, but I'm excited for all the adventures that it has in store.
Donkey. Okay. Well, that was fun. But anyway, yeah, no, Gen Alpha is God. They're different, aren't they? Like I don't understand all the jokes or the memes. Like I'm learning. So thank you for being a translator.
Oh, trying. Look, I'm still, catching up. But look, they're an interesting generation too, right? Like they just did a protest on Twitch. And
I love that.
Yeah. And it's like
we can learn from them.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like everyone has the ability to learn too, right? Like that doesn't, no matter your age, it just depends on like how open you are to learning things, right? But I do laugh at the idea of like explaining to like Chuck Grassley again, who's just really centering of this, conversation, like 91-year-old Iowa guy, like, oh, like this is what Twitch is and what Gen Alpha is doing. Like it is an interesting situation, but nonetheless.
Funny. Okay, so I'd love to, well, if you have any closing thoughts, please share that. But then beyond that, please tell my audience where they can find and follow you. They can get this bite-sized Hope Core, which I love.
Yes,
and keep up to date on news.
For sure. Well, you can find the GovHub newsletter on the Girl on the Gov website, girlonthegov.com, as well as #viral and keeping it current. You just swipe on over to that newsletters tab and you'll find all of them there and be able to subscribe, share all of the things. And then on social, it is Girl on the Gov everywhere. There are 2 Instas, Girl on the Gov and Girl on the Gov HQ. So you'll be able to find details there. Keep up with all the yapping in store.
Thank you so much, Sammy.
Thank you. This has been great.
Bye.
Bye.
Here's my closing thought for today. In the patriarchy, women are discouraged from being in the public sphere, such as in government, and their voices and concerns are silenced, deliberately to concentrate power in the hands of men. But in the Gynarchy, we know that women are natural leaders, first in the home and also in social circles and in their communities. And we should encourage women to hold power in greater society and including in government. So down with the patriarchy and up with the Gynarchy. Thank you so much for listening. Did you enjoy this episode of the Gynarchy Podcast? Know someone else who might enjoy this conversation? Make sure to subscribe and share the show with your friends and family. Find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and just about anywhere you find podcasts. On social media, we can be found on Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok at The Gynarchy. Thank you so much for listening.